Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I guess it is technically afternoon almost wherever you are. Maybe not in Hawaii if you're tuning in from Hawaii or whatever. Welcome to a special bonus edition of Disorganized Play. I'm your host and oft Dungeon Master, Tom Lommel. Welcome. With me today, once again, back in the co-pilot chair here, is Mr. J. Africa.
Howdy, everybody.
You saw Jay last week on Tales from the Loop, which was a super fun game.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a little bit of something to refer to that, actually, here in this first look. So.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and he's like, I caught the replay of it. And he's like, I loved the whole, like, even though it took an hour, I loved all the character building and stuff like that. It made such real characters. So that was fun. We're not here to talk about Tales from the Loop, though, despite the wonderful game that we had Wednesday night, which was an adaptation of Tales of the Loop also for our Iron Keep return. We're here to talk about Waterdeep Dragon Heist. So the book just dropped today. It was the official release for Wizards Play Network stores. Is that the technical term still?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Wizards Premier stores.
Whatever it is. Yeah. So if your local game store is a partner with Wizards, which if they sell Magic, they probably are, then they have a copy that you can go and pick up today of the new adventure, Waterdeep Dragon Heist. It is an urban adventure hardcover, levels 1 through 5. I believe the official street date is like 2 weeks from now, something like that.
Yeah, it's like 11 days. I think the 17th or something like that. So
if you are,
but around then you should be able to pick it up at your friendly local game store.
Oh, Vorpal Raid! Oh, Amy, thanks for sending your fans over here. I hope you won your game of Hearthstone, and I hope you are recuperated from our game on Wednesday night. Good to see you and everyone else. Welcome aboard, Modern Chow and Bondo and friends. I was going to say, if you are an Amazon type of person, I'm mixed on that myself, but we do have a donation link or an Amazon Smile account where a portion of your purchase would actually help support the channel. So feel free, if you're not going to support your FLGS for whatever reason. I'm a big fan of paying a few extra bucks to help create a space where new people who are coming into the hobby, and there's a lot of them, can come and play and sit down and learn the game from somebody who knows how to play the game and hopefully have a good experience, or at least pick up the books and get some questions answered and go start their own gaming group.
Yeah, meet tons of people, have a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that's the buzz. It's available now. You may have seen some sneak previews elsewhere and whatnot. I literally just drove here from my comic shop, my local comic shop, with my copy and have not seen the final. I did do some review for the playtest drafts that went on in this, which I can't really talk about what was in those or what I said, but I'm curious to see if any, what changes may have come around in this thing. So let's take a look. Also, I don't know if is the inset cam in here or not. Yes, we live down here. So we got a blind box of the Dragon Heist minis. I got upsold on that, which was fine. Also, I just got the Creature Codex from Kobold Press. So if we have some time, we'll take a flip through that as well. If you are looking for a third-party supplement for your 5e game, I highly recommend the stuff from Kobold Press. I also backed the Tome of Beasts a couple of years ago, and it is a fantastic monster book, and so that made this second additional monster book kind of a no-brainer for me to pick up on Kickstarter. And I just got it, I think I got it last week. So it just started delivering. You should be able to pick up the PDF immediately if that's what you're so inclined to do. So we'll try and take a look at them. Yeah, Texas Devin points out if we're gonna do a little side by side, which I don't know that's fair, but the Creature Codex is a 2 or 3 times bigger.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to compare that to the Monster Manual and like Volos Guide or Mordenkainen's, because I think this is about as thick as both of the books combined.
Let's take a look. So this is the Monster Manual, and that's the I'm not a big fan of like, oh, this page count is what let's break it down how much it costs per page, right? Like, I think RPG products are already like just the basic stuff that you get it's already made like a great deal in terms of the amount of utility that you get out of it. But this thing it got stretched out with indexes and indices and whatnot. It's 420 pages, right?
That's pretty impressive.
But that's pretty great. I can't tell you off the top of my head how many monsters are in here. But I thought I would bring it along because I just got it and I'm a big fan of the stuff that they do. So, oh wow. So let's flip this thing open and take a look. I believe I saw some stuff on Twitter last night that there's a map inside. Am I right about that?
Yep, there is a fold-out poster map.
You know, Jay, you've had a chance to actually look at this thing. Why don't you start talking through it a little bit?
Well,
give me the dime store overview while I do my job as a hand model here.
Okay, sure.
And show everybody what's going on.
Yeah, no worries. Well, first of all, so for those of you that aren't familiar with it, Waterdeep Dragon Heist is an urban adventure that takes place in Waterdeep, the City of Splendors, which is one of the major cities in the Forgotten Realms, which is D&D 5th edition's current campaign setting. It gives not just what's great about this book is it gives not just the adventure itself, but a lot of detail about the city of Waterdeep that you can then use to enrich your campaign or use as a jumping point for future campaigns set in this city. Let's see.
So the table of contents here, I'm not able to read upside down.
Where's here? We got 2 copies of the book, so.
Yeah.
So the table of contents, the first 3 or 4 chapters are dedicated to, the first chapter is dedicated to an introduction to the city of Waterdeep, what it's like to sort of adventure through there, some of the key players. And then the next 2 or 3 chapters are dedicated to events that happen in the city that you can sort of set your characters into.
If it was not already obvious, this review is going to be spoiler-tastic. So if you're planning on playing on this,
lots
you
and
may
lots
want
of
to kind of
spoilers.
I don't know, just hit mute and then we'll see all the pretty pictures. No,
Sure.
I don't. Use your own discretion, but we're not going to hold back in terms of here's what's inside and here's what happens. And obviously, I just showed the entire table of contents on screen here, right? So.
Sure.
So we're not gonna tiptoe around spoilers in this particular review.
Yeah, this initial, this first little overview will probably be pretty broad, but then we'll start to get into the nuts and bolts of things a little later in the review as well. First few chapters dedicated to an introduction to the city, an introduction to adventuring in Waterdeep, what the setting is like. And then the next few chapters after that are certain events that sort of lead your characters through this mystery of unfolding happenings that go on in the city. And then this is sort of where it gets really, really spoilery. From chapter 5 to 8, you start getting into details regarding the main villains of the adventure itself. And if you're a player, seriously, mute now or turn your eyes, avert your eyes. If you're a DM, feel free.
Disorganized play is a DM's show, so there's the odd chance that somebody will be playing. But
absolutely. Chapters 5 through 8 detail 4 different villains that your characters can face. And so that's sort of the shtick of this adventure, is that it goes through level 1. It goes from level 1 through 5, but you can play it multiple times, highlighting one villain or another each time you play through. Which isn't to say that the villains don't interact during the course of the story. They do. You can switch from one villain to another, as far as depending on how it makes sense to your adventure. But if you want to sort of keep it contained to one particular villain, you can play those various villains separately. And then chapter 9 and onward are, chapter 9 is how many pages is it? It's a lot of pages. It's 20 or so pages dedicated to just fleshing out the city of Waterdeep for your players and giving you material that you can plumb or use in your own campaign or take from this setting to another city of your choice. And then there are several appendices afterwards that detail the magic items that you get, monsters and NPCs, and there are some really cool NPCs here. If you're into Forgotten Realms lore in particular, there are some key NPCs that are detailed in this adventure. And then the last one are a series of handouts that, again, you can show to your players about a couple of the settings of Waterdeep, as well as just like the Waterdeep code legal, like the legal code of what's persecutable as your characters run around in the city. Because we all know that characters aren't all going to be lawful good. Some of them are going to be chaotic, and some even chaotic evil, and they could get into trouble. So the code legal kind of gives you as a DM and your characters a guideline as to what can and can't be done throughout the city of Waterdeep.
It's a great 2-page spread here. I know
There is.
newbie DM on Twitter did sort of a flip through last night to just kind of like take some photos and give some first impressions. And he was like, they really blew their budget on art here.
Yeah, they really did.
There's some great illustrations, as we can see. And Dyson Logos did the maps. You've probably seen his work around. It honestly, I think Dyson Logos has sort of like reset the style of maps. Like it's a cross between sort of an old school and kind of a new aesthetic. And I see a lot of people like rip off Dyson Logos.
Sure. They're inspired by Dyson's techniques.
They actually got him to do
a
lot of the interior stuff here. So that's cool.
Well, that's one of the interesting departures of this book from previous D&D adventures, is that all of the cartography has been done by Dyson Logos, except for the fold-out map of Waterdeep at the very end.
Yeah. Which it turns out it says in the credits that it's Mike Schley, but it's not Mike Schley.
It's not. No, does it say in the credits?
It says on the map. The map, anyhow. I don't know about in the book credits.
Yeah, no, it's correctly attributed to Jason Angle in the book. But wow,
on the actual, there's a misprint on the actual fold-out map.
Oh, interesting. Okay, all right.
So, and there's some great 2-page spreads here and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's fun. I hope that the disadvantage to not getting this off of like Roll20, for instance, or D&D Beyond, I guess, whatever. The disadvantage to that is you don't have these pictures as like handouts that you can print off.
Sure,
and
yeah.
kind of like hand out. Like you have to actually like flip open your book and go, it looks like this.
Yeah.
Which on a 2-page spread like this is not a problem, but if I want to show somebody something like this scene, then I got to do that weird thing where I like cover up this page and don't look at I'm trusting you guys not to look at this stuff.
Right.
But there's a lot of there's another 2-page spread, so there's some really great artwork in here. So at least like I said, I haven't had a huge chance to flip through this, but there's some nice illustrations of Waterdavian currency.
Yep.
One of the things that I like about this adventure, and I'm assuming that they didn't do some sort of radical change from when I looked through the playtest stuff, is that it has, like Storm King's Thunder, it has multiple tracks, right? So, and I thought they did this in a particularly clever way, which is they have different seasons, right? So the mystery unfolds, and as a DM, you can pick what time of year you want to run this in, and then it gives you encounters that are like tailored to winter in Waterdeep.
Right. Yeah.
But what that means is that each of those tracks is different, so you can kind of like you can pick whichever one you think is most interesting. Obviously, you can like steal stuff from a different season and go, oh, okay, I don't know where, I want to use this for something. I'm just going to reskin it into a winter encounter or whatever. So
there's a lot of flexibility in the module, which is great, or the adventure rather, which is great.
And I think that is a tremendous step up from kind of your traditional module structure, which has always been more of here's the main storyline and a couple alternate side treks or encounters and go, right? So I always find that this is you have to follow this one plot. I like a lot of options.
Sure, yeah.
Because
absolutely.
I can't stay with one plot.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things about this particular adventure is that you have these 4 different villains, and they're not helping one another. And you have these factions throughout the city. And, these factions have their own motivations. And, again, the villains aren't helping one another. Some of them are actively acting against one another. And so there's a lot of potential for, your players to kind of get through all of this intrigue and subterfuge, and they can join up with one party and start feeling trouble against another party, or they can join, they can switch allegiances in the middle of things, and it's like a really big playground basically.
Right.
You're given as a DM you're given a lot of great tools to keep the city alive and to keep your characters on their toes.
Put this in so that I can actually look through the book.
Yeah, absolutely. To keep your characters on their toes, because there can potentially be so much going on in the city.
I think too, one of the innovations is they give you some rules for, or there's a premise here that the players are granted some land and they can actually take over, a tavern and choose to run that as a business or whatever. And it feels to me like this is not just a urban adventure, but it's like it's designed to like give your characters a home, feel like they're part of Waterdeep, as opposed to, so often we're strangers who've just arrived here, and what's this big city about? Which is fine, and it's fine to have that kind of fish out of water kind of premise for an adventure. I've certainly we've done that in Iron Keep, but it's nice to actually have a point in the plot where they can latch on and integrate themselves into the social fabric of the community or whatever.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. I kind of liken this to sort of the Deep Space Nine of D&D adventures, whereas other adventures are the Next Generation, where you're going out and exploring other locations.
Yeah.
In this one, you can establish yourself and trouble can come to you.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is which is great. Your characters kind of develop a home. That home can get threatened by the various groups.
It's such a terrific hook, right? And I think we've seen that done in other. I've seen it done in other places or whatnot in other games, but that doesn't mean that it's not welcome here.
Yeah.
They've certainly given a firm handshake to the kind of the Critical Role aspect of things. Matt Mercer's Force Grey is in here.
Oh yeah,
he appears
absolutely.
in the Yawning Portal illustrations, which is very cool.
Kind of cute.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if you're looking for new factions, if factions matter to you for AL play, there is a whole new faction for Force Grey. That's part of the canon here. So
yeah,
that's involved.
Yeah, and it's interesting because again, a lot of the adventures have sort of been. A lot of them have been drawing inspiration from various portions of D&D lore, but I think this one, just because the location is so concentrated, so specific, there's a lot of lore that they've managed to pull into this particular book as well, that again just sort of enriches the Forgotten Realms and enriches whatever setting you have. You can take a lot of these personalities, pluck them out of here, put them elsewhere, have them sort of fill different functions. And in terms of factions, for example, the Bregan Darth is here, which is it's Jarlaxle Banre's Drow faction from Menzoberran's and swashbuckling faction. The Xanathar Guild is here, and Xanathar has, as a character and as and the guild as a presence, has sort of been being built up over the past few seasons of D&D adventures as well. So it's good to see that kind of form a bigger play a bigger role here in this book here.
What I like about the chapter, I mean, they have a whole chapter dedicated to, are you going to take over this tavern, have this business or whatever, and they give a nice thumbnail sketch of the neighborhood, kind of who the main characters are, how your various factions might do have a contact, get involved in the adventure itself and whatnot, but also would you have some rivals in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
So it gives you a nice, as the DM, it gives you a nice sort of jumping off point. I know this little corner of Waterdeep. I have some ideas of, I'm given some suggestions on major places, locations that are there, who might be in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I can make those connections with my party. And then, you always have a little bit of room to fill in your own details and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it rather than going, Waterdeep is such a huge city. One of my issues is that there's been so much written about it. Really knowing it, I feel like it's hard to really know. Kind of like trying to know New York City if you've never been to New York City. But there's literally thousands of books you could read about New York City and the various neighborhoods and how to get from here to there.
Yeah.
But does any of them really cover it in a level of detail? You could go, well, this is the book on New York City that you read. So with Waterdeep, I find it kind of overwhelming to go, it's such a huge place. How can I describe everything canonically and accurately? And I think part of it is just my own, like, you need to get rid of that attitude of, like, it's your game.
Yeah.
When you describe it, it's your canon.
Yeah, yeah. The world becomes yours.
Right. But what I like about this is it rather than trying to give you a resource that overwhelms you with every single location within Waterdeep and who could be involved in what, and here's all the hooks and all the behind-the-scenes shady dealings that's going on, like, rather than trying to attempt that and cram an adventure into this thing, they give you that specific sketch of this section of town is going to be very important for you and your players as their home base. Here's what's going on. Here's your firm foundation. Change it if you want, and let's get into the rest of it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
it's a very story-focused adventure, which is great. I wanted to just kind of call back to the artwork for this particular adventure, and as you know, Tom mentioned, there are some really, really great 2-page spreads here. One of the things that I like about the artwork is that there are these recurring characters, and there are these 3 kids. So I think you have like a couple of humans and a tiefling, and you see them sort of appearing throughout the rest of the adventure. So let's see. Oh, come on, where'd they go? I know there's so much great art in here. Where are those spreads? They're harder to find when you're upside down. So, for example, this one, you know, you see this girl with the long hair, the tiefling with the horns and the red skin, and there's this sort of little heavy-set child over there. As you kind of look through the adventure, you'll notice their presence in a lot of these spreads. So there's sort of like a little mini story that's kind of being told throughout the game of these kids getting in trouble throughout the city of Waterdeep. Come on, where'd you go? There you go. So see, there they are again. There's the long-haired, you know, individual. This is a kid with the tiefling, and then there's the heavy. Yeah, and each one sort of represents one of the main villains. They kind of have little ties, and they're not directly related to, but they carry like traits of these main villains. And that's what sort of drew me back to the whole Tales from the Loop game that we played. I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love to play like street urchins running around in Waterdeep, like getting into all sorts of hijinks and misadventures and stuff.
I think you know, I was initially sort of skeptical about like, well, this is at levels 1 to 5, and you know, it's a big Waterdeep adventure, but I think it's smart to set this thing in Waterdeep as a low-level adventure because it gives you like a reason to have a fresh start in a new location and set up a new party and make them feel like they're part of the action and they can matter. Whereas my kind of armchair observations of Waterdeepers, I was like, there's an archmage and there's a guy riding around on a dragon. You know, it's as the New York City of the Forgotten Realms, like, you can get anything you want somewhere. You just have to pay the right price and know the right person.
The right people,
and I feel like as low-level adventurers, you can often feel like you're outclassed by anything that might be going on around. And secondarily, like, as a DM, you can feel like, well, why, you know, what if they just run into Xanathar? It's like, yeah, well, what if they do? Like, let's think about that and how Xanathar might be an appropriate challenge for a party that's level 3.
Right.
You know, like, what does that encounter look like?
Yeah.
So I think it's smart to say, this is not your epic level destination at this point. You know, we've had so many adventures that, you know, there's a ton of people now this far into 5e that have 12th, 13th, 14th level characters.
Yeah, if not,
and they're like, well, let's take it from 14 to 20 or whatever. And I think it would have been a mistake to make this Waterdeep book that thing, right? I think I don't think that's... I feel like this is another good, like... Because there's so many people coming into the hobby, I feel like this is another good recommendation for, okay, if you want to start playing a game that's not quite so, like, not quite so linear storyline and has a little more of like an urban flavor rather than your traditional go into the woods and kill goblins type of thing.
Yeah.
This is a good offering for the hordes of people who are still coming into the hobby.
Yeah.
Rather than... I'm not opposed to like an epic level, and I think that's what Dungeons of the Mad Mage is going to end up being, right?
Exactly.
Like if you want to challenge your 15th level paladin, that book's going to have it,
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
So I do want to say that there's also something, you know, I already mentioned that they've divided kind of like these storylines into seasons, and there are like a recurring set of locations that like. At the theater in the winter, this happens. At the theater in the summer, this happens. So that there is some economy of scale of it's the same map, generally some of the same inhabitants, but you might have dramatically different events depending upon who your main villain is, what season it is, and whatnot. They do have in the on page 59, they have an entire flowchart of if you're running winter, this is assumed who your main villain is, and this is the chain of encounters that will lead you through the storyline to the big payoff, right?
Yeah.
If you're in autumn, if you're in summer, spring. So that's helpful for one thing. I think that's a great fundamental, like, I like flowcharts like that because what it enables me to do is look at that and go, oh, I could probably get rid of this and get rid of this, and as long as I forward these elements from those encounters, we'll be able to kind of like smoothly continue the storyline, but compress it a little bit. It also enables me to go, let's see, maybe I should steal something from over here. More importantly, one of the things that I love about this from a design perspective is it makes me think about the city during the actual 4 seasons, right? And so many times in fantasy role-playing, everything it suffers from what I call Star Wars system. This is the ice city, and this is the desert city, and this is the forest planet. You know, and there's not anything like dynamic going on, right? And just by virtue of the fact that they have deliberately talked about and given you information on what the city is like in winter, what it's like when spring comes around, what it's like in the summer. It makes you think of the place really as like a fully dynamic, like living world that has climate, as opposed to a more static kind of, we go into the depths of the forest. And I'm guilty of it as anybody, right? Like you look at the game that we're running for Iron Keep that we're about to start up next week, and there's not really weather in the forest, you know. We're adventuring in a early, like a prehistory of the Neverwinter woods, right? But I haven't really thought about like, oh well, what would it be like if it was like autumn or fall or whatever?
Yeah, right.
You know, this gives you not just like that inspiration of like, oh, it could be any time of the year, but also gives you the tools to kind of tailor the town to that season.
Right, like kind of track it through the year. And one of the things that they have in the Waterdeep gazetteer at the end of the book, there's a list of city celebrations. So there are about 4.5 pages dedicated to the various festivals that happen and like what time of year they go through, and you can use that to kind of flavor, you know, your adventure as well as your characters are tracking through time. So that's pretty cool. One thing that I don't think they included was the calendar of the Forgotten Realms, which probably would help. But there are those.
I'm
you know,
sure that's
you can
in the
find
Sword
those
Coast
around.
Adventurer's Guide, right? Is that
You know what?
not?
Yeah, I think it is in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. Yeah. And you can find, you know, various versions of that, like, you know,
let's see what
various sources online. So
is there. There's a table of context. Is there an index? Let's ask.
I don't think so. Is there? I think it's just
there's a
yawning
key to the
portal.
yawning portal. Who's
Yeah.
who? There's some handouts here. There's some maps. You know, I like I like having these things, right?
Yeah, the character portraits.
I love these character portraits, and that's the hard part for me of like buying the hard copy versus getting the electronic version. Is I really want to print these out individually, without having to go make photocopies of them or whatever. But that's fine. That's fine and dandy. We'll live through it.
Okay.
I'm
gonna break this map out.
Oh,
we'll spread it out on the
okay.
table for people to see. So I'm gonna tear the perforation here.
In terms of things that are in the appendix that are new, we have a bunch of NPCs. I don't know that there's any new monsters in here.
Not so much new monsters as there are just the NPCs.
Yeah.
There are the walking statues of Waterdeep, which you could very well use as monsters in your own campaign.
Oh boy.
Which are really cool. There are some monsters that appear in other books, I believe at least, or at least maybe some of the NPCs that appear in other books.
I think the Gazer
the
Gazer is in there.
Yeah. But what's really, really cool, what I think is really cool, if you're into Forgotten Realms at all, is there are stat blocks for several of the key individuals that have been playing roles in the Forgotten Realms, like Jarlaxle, the Drow rogue and leader of the Brigandarth. There is Laryl's.
I'm going to give away some content here.
All right, spoilery stuff
there
again.
They are.
Yeah, there's Laryl Silverhand, who is the Open Lord, the current Open Lord of Waterdeep. There is...
the picture's on the previous page or the next page?
I don't
know. It was the next page. I got it.
Yeah, so there's Laryl Silverhand. There are stats for Manshun, who is the I'm going to say the alleged or like revived leader of the Zentarum. And what really kind of got me was the stats and the portrait for Blackstaff Vajra, which is really cool. She's kind of been playing a role in various adventures, in particular the Force Grey adventures that have been DM'd by Matt Mercer. She is the Blackstaff who is in charge of the Grey Hands in Force Grey. They're sort of these like peacekeeping agents in Waterdeep, and so that was really cool that she's been included there.
So there's 3 pages of magic items. No, 4. That's not fair. 4. Yeah, 4 pages of magic items, which I think is probably like typical. Let's be honest. These adventures are not a vehicle. Wizards does not use them as a vehicle to roll out tons of new content, right? Like they very rarely include new class things or a bunch of new magic items in one of their hardcover adventures.
Let's just lay out the map.
Let me make some room here.
So yeah, this is the fold-out map in the back. What we have is a map of Waterdeep. This one is generally unlabeled. It's more for the player-facing side of the table.
So I think this is actually Jason Engel. It's wrong on the map. But it's actually Jason. That's fine. Huh. We found that out on Twitter last night.
Wow, that's.
There's apparently a DM side and a player side. I don't know which one this is.
Sure, this is the player's side. The DM side is very graciously labeled. It's got a few more locations.
Got the locations.
A few more key locations. So.
It's nice that they included both, like made it a double-sided thing where you can show your players and then go, oh, okay, well, where's our next encounter going to happen?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Makes it nice and handy. So. And it's also nice that the DM has something big like this, a large image like this to look at, rather than, having to be confined to an 8.5 by 11 page or like whatever this size is. One like little page of map that you'd have to pour over.
Right. So I want to take a look at the section on Volos Guide to Waterdeep, right? So that starts here on 163 and it goes to 188. So this is where it's almost like a little sub booklet within the book, right? So this is essentially like gazetteer version of here's what's going on in Waterdeep. Here's how you can bring the city to life, right? What the brief history is, how you get by, what the laws are like. Again, here's an example of the currency, taxes, etc., etc. And this was something that I certainly lobbied for in my notes. Is there's been so much written about Waterdeep that it's hard to know. Like, okay, well, what's canon now? How do I make this city feel like the thriving metropolis that it is, you know, what are my boundaries, you know? Because I personally, as a DM, just want to know, like, well, what power level can I get away with without making one of my players run into somebody else, go,
sure,
wait, what's going on?
Right.
I mean, that happens anyhow.
Yeah,
I'm kind of a jerk that way. But I just want to have kind of an idea of, like, well, what keeps people from just fireballing citizen, you know, having a mage fight in the middle of the city,
sure,
or busting into the museum and stealing stuff, or, you know, outright theft and whatnot. And so I was really, like, you know, anxious to see, okay, well, here's our first kind of in-depth look at Waterdeep.
Yeah.
Because in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, we get a thumbnail sketch of Waterdeep. Let's see if I can I find that quickly? I can, because there's an index in here. Waterdeep is, you know, 55 to 57. It's just a few pages, right? There's other stuff as well, but the main entry is 55 to 57. And so I was keen to see this book and what they were going to do with the opportunity to go in a little bit more detail. So, you know, and part of it is, you know, of that layout, like, they give you a full page map of the city, which is essential. But it feels like Waterdeep was given kind of perfunctory mention here because it's an important place on the Sword Coast. But it was very clearly, like, staked out as, like, we're going to do something bigger with this.
Yeah.
So the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide doesn't have much, and that's why I was keen to see what they would do with this. I think it's difficult to strike a balance, right? They could have just put out, in my opinion, a Waterdeep source book.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not the strategy that they have been taking. No. So I get that they didn't do that. But they could have done 256 pages on Waterdeep.
Yeah, just on lore and flavor and absolutely. But yeah, no, the strategy for Wizards of the Coast 5th edition is just the story. It's the story. So what is the story that they're setting behind this setting of Waterdeep?
You know, and I think the other consideration here is, because there's been so much published on Waterdeep, you can go to dndclassics.com or DM's Guild or whatever. You know, like, you can go to the PDF market and you can get all of that stuff in all that back catalog in electronic format if that's what you want to read, you know?
Sure, absolutely.
Or just cherry pick something off of eBay. Like, when I ran an adventure, I ran like I don't know, 3 months in Waterdeep last year. And so I went and got Volos Guide to the North, right? And it was just packed with all flavor stuff. It was all flavor stuff. It had really, like, almost no rule. Sometimes there was rule stuff like, you know, Schnormaster, you know, goat herd has an iron golem that he keeps in the back room that has a +3 sword and a whip of petrification or whatever. And you're like, okay, well, that's clearly an AD&D thing.
Sure, right, yeah.
But guess what? It's so easy to, like,
just move it over, port it all over.
So if you want more, it's available. It's not like this is a stranglehold on all of the information about Waterdeep.
Absolutely.
Right?
And in fact, I mean, it's not even close to all of the information that there is in Waterdeep, but it does give you quite a bit to work with. And it's a really good introduction to the City of Splendors.
Right. So yeah, it's a great overview. It gives you enough to get going. You understand the structure of the city. You definitely understand who the players are, because that's what the story is. Yeah. Right? So rather than having 20 pages on who Manchun is and what he's up to, or 20 pages on who Xanathar is and how he runs, or it runs its organization, you can learn that through actually interacting with Manchun's forces and interacting with Xanathar's forces.
Absolutely.
And encounter it through adventure rather than just you as the DM read it and go, well, now what's cool about that?
Yeah.
Like, how could I? And especially with these various forces that are so powerful, like Manchun and Xanathar and whatnot,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a tall order for the average DM to go, oh, well, my party's just 3rd level, though, so I'm going to save that for later. And you go,
right.
You don't have to.
Yeah, there are ways that you can have, your characters really just dive into the plot and all of the circumstances set in the adventure. So, and also it's worth noting that while everything is sort of wrapped up in this urban adventure, and they're very much it's very much structured for the characters to sort of be exploring various areas around Waterdeep. The villains themselves feel quite different, and so if you want something that's a little more geared towards interacting with like the nobility or like surface political intrigue, there's a villain that sort of caters to that. If you want more of an underground feel, a seedier underground feel, there's a villain that caters to that as well. And it's all wrapped up in all of these factions kind of interacting with one another out on the streets.
I have to say that flipping through some of the encounters here and whatnot, one thing that I like, I guess I'll show you this. This page has a map on it. I don't want to give too much of the maps away. There's not a lot I can do about that. But like in this particular one of the encounters, you go into a courthouse, right? Mm-hmm. Now, traditionally, an encounter like this, you would say to yourself, oh, well, they wrote a sentence, and then they gave us 4 bullet points. They're like, what kind of, cheap out tactic is that? For me personally, I don't need 4 sentences or 6 sentences, kind of flowery descriptive language or whatever. Like, I'll try and fill that in myself. And especially if it's not a room, that it's the courtroom. Like, right. Do you need to know what kind of wood the desk is made out of and whatnot? Yeah, like, okay, you can. But I like that there's 4 bullet points that's like, there's 2 guards stationed here. If court is in session, this person is here. Right. There's a cloth draped over this box, blah, 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 blah. Hanging on the wall are these things. There's the 4 things you need to know about this room. I can look at this, scan this for literally 45 seconds and go, okay, I have a sense of this room. Yeah, and I have a sense of what's going on. And I don't have to get bogged down in finding what the relevant information is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I'm not going to say that I'm 100% against box text, because I definitely like to have, like, if I'm going to do an introduction to an adventure, I like to have details about how it kicks off and what's setting the scene and whatnot. Yeah. But then once it's up and running, and I'm starting to respond in real time with what the players are doing in response to the information I'm giving them, then all of that information starts to get in the way. Yeah, right? Absolutely. When I get into the middle of an adventure and I'm faced with a big chunk of box text, it screws up my pacing. It causes me to kind of like stop and go, well, wait a minute, is this... They went at night. Is what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of assumptions that a writer has to be cognizant of avoiding when they're writing the box text, and yet they have a very vivid picture in their mind of what that place looks like. And once they start describing details, I don't know about when you write, actual published adventures, but once I get a detail in my head, then I start drilling down into like, oh yeah, and he has a fine, like he's a feather quill on his desk, but it's made out of gold. It's petrified. It's been turned to gold by an alchemist, and and you start creating all these details that all of a sudden take you way off the main track. Yeah. And much like I've just sort of been off on this long tangent myself, when I get box text that doesn't sync up with what my players are doing, what their goal is, the information that they're pursuing, the circumstances that have been built up to that point, now I have to go through this process of trying to figure out, processing what's important, and then also editing out the stuff that's not relevant.
Right, like having to paraphrase the box text to fit whatever's happening.
Yeah. No, so absolutely. I'm really glad that when they have details that they need, like this is a hostage situation, and here are the things that could potentially happen. Da 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 da. Like they give time to that text so that they can advise the DM on here are some dynamic things that are going on in this encounter.
Right.
But in a situation like this where they might go explore the courtroom, it's not essential. Like it's not a big core part of the scene, you know, or whatever. Right. Here's 4 bullet points that will get you up to speed on how to run.
What's going on in this location, not so much. Yeah. In fact, there's very few. I mean, this is also sort of a shift in Wizards of the Coast thinking about about how adventures should be structured. There's very little box text in this entire adventure. You get a lot of circumstances. You get important descriptions for areas. But as far as read aloud text for players, there's not a whole lot in here. So it gives the DM a real opportunity to make the adventure theirs, to really tailor the description as much or as little as they need, as their players would enjoy. I'd like to point out one more thing. You pointed out that encounter in the courthouse, and this is something that I found really, really interesting too. And this is something that I really appreciate. This is a pretty.
I talked about that.
Oh yeah, no, I know. But what it is this is a hefty adventure. It's levels 1 through 5, and it's a lot of pages. There are a lot of moving parts. But what I like about this is that those moving parts sort of shift and reconfigure depending on what track or what villain you're playing. So it's not like each villain has 12 encounters that you need to prepare. If you look at the spring sequence, you got encounter 2, encounter 4. Those encounters also sort of appear throughout these various other tracks. So in spring, you might hit encounter 2 first, but in autumn, you'll hit that later on in the process. And each encounter has details about the season or the villains that you encounter,
right?
That you can then tailor to where your adventurers are, where your players are. So that makes it a little easier to absorb the information. It's not like you're preparing multiple things that you have to then figure out how to fit pieces of. You've already got those pieces, and you just sort of reconfigure them and, let your players decide almost like, what order should these be hit. So if you start in the spring track and you go one way, and then certain events kind of lead you to face the villain in, say, the summer track, you kind of just have there's a sort of limited scope, or there's a sort of enclosed scope in which you can figure out where to take your characters next, where to take your players next, rather. And it's a lot more digestible than some adventurers might be. And so I thought that was a strength of this particular one.
Yeah. So just to go back to the box text, for instance. There is an encounter at a villa, and it's 12 pages long or something like that to describe the whole thing, right?
It's like one of the main villains,
right?
Yeah.
So it's a major thing, and they have a map of it and whatnot, but they have one section of box text that gives, like you said, an overview of it, and then the rest of it is. Here's the room, here's the room, here's the room, here's some bullet points about the room. And here's a note if you're in this particular season of what's going on here, right? So I like that economy of information.
Yeah, it's quite efficient.
You might see that as I don't know, I feel like the old school take on that would be like, oh, well, why didn't they really give me the details here?
Right.
And the answer is, like, they gave you the essential details, and
yeah,
I appreciate the opportunity to make it as finely detailed or as bare bones as I want it, as I need it to be when I'm at the table.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So I will say, if you're one of those people who wants to know what the desk is made out of and what 3 things are in the drawer and who that painting is of and this may not necessarily be your cup of tea, right? It's not designed to. It's not a novel. It doesn't have that density to it.
Right.
that's in my mind that's fine.
Yeah.
Here's one of the reasons that's fine for me. I don't want to talk just momentarily about like DMing philosophy about this, right? Which is your players are always. I don't remember if I've said this. We were talking about this, or when we were talking about this. But I've come around to the idea, especially having run Tales from the Loop, that every game that you run, every D&D game that you run, is a mystery game.
Yeah.
Even if it's not explicitly a mystery game, right? So that's one of the premises that I've kind of come around to in my DMing career is that your players are always trying to figure out what is happening.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
even if they think they know, then the next part of that mystery is, and how do we overcome it or fix it or whatever, right? And so every game is a mystery game, even if it's not, someone was murdered in the dark of the night, and there was a figure in scarlet who slipped away into the fog. Even if it's not that, sometimes the mystery is literally just, where are the goblins keeping the gold pieces?
Right.
Look, it's that simple.
Where's
right?
where's the prince of the castle been kidnapped?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if it's but my point there is, even if it's a simple dungeon crawl, which is we're going to go kill monsters and take stuff, it's still in some way, shape, or form a mystery, which is which way do we go to achieve our objective, stab those gobos, and take their 40 gold pieces or whatever,
and not get killed,
right? and not get killed ourselves, etc. So every game is a mystery game, and in that respect, what that means is information is your currency to pick up the pace of the plot. To extend the plot, to complicate and twist events in a way that's interesting and refreshing for the players. So information is your tool. It's your Quicksilver as a DM, right? And when you introduce new information, your players on the other side of the screen generally have no idea how relevant this thing is to the plot that you have embroiled them in or that they're engaged with, right? So if you say there's a picture of a man with huge mutton chops and steely gray eyes, whose portrait is hanging in the corner, and he has an ornate silver sword that he is resting his hands on, they don't know when you're telling them that whether that's just some fun flavor text room dressing, like, oh, clearly this is the office of a man who has noble ancestry, or maybe that is the man. Well, and then you go, oh, maybe that is the man. Is this the guy? Is the guy going to come in with a silver sword? Is he a noble? Are we going to get in trouble?
Are we going to run into this guy later?
So they have no idea what the relevance is. They're trying to process that, right? And so when you have a room that has a bunch of description like that, the danger is that the players latch onto that and go, well, okay, no, wait a minute. No, tell me, well, I want to make a history check. Do I know who this guy is?
Exactly.
And now you as the DM are in the position of trying to either give this thing weight.
Right, yeah.
That's appropriate. Yeah. And you have to negotiate the mechanics of like, you make a history check. He's a long-lost lord. You remember him as being a trader of fish. He traded in seafood, and he became very wealthy from it. And he was known for being ostentatious and very egotistical. And so he had a lot of paintings of him made. And that's your way of saying, nobody gives a crap about this.
Right, yeah. But then your players latch onto those details, and they're like,
or not, or whatever.
So,
but the point being is that you have introduced information that as the DM is like, well, this isn't super. This is flavor. This is a fun flavor. I'm going to give them a sense of the world. I'm going to paint the picture for them, and they grab onto that thing and go, oh, I want to know about that.
Becomes their
now
thing.
That's a great opportunity. Like as a DM, I would encourage you to then all of a sudden well, if they're engaged by this guy, oh yeah, you've seen this guy trading money with one of the street urchins down in the common square. Get him involved in the plot, even if he wasn't involved in the plot. If your players are engaged in it, then try and find a way to incorporate it into the story that you're trying to build together with them. Like, make it a partnership. But if you do too much of that, you run the risk of losing the plot thread, of the players forgetting stuff earlier that was important, that actually was relevant, where you're like, guys, don't you know you've got to find the golden orb that unlocks the da-da-da-da-da, whatever it was, and they're like, oh, that golden orb, wasn't that like weeks ago? Do you even remember that? I remember there's something about, who did we talk to? Because players can only remember basically like 3 things in 3 sessions, right?
Yeah.
And so when you introduce too much of this information, you start muddying the water for the players, because they're also on this doing this balancing game of, is this relevant? Is he telling me something that's important?
Am I gonna have to worry about this? Is this detail that I missed like gonna bite me in the butt later on? Yep.
And invariably, like, they will miss something that is important, and they'll go, oh, I didn't, it happened to me on Wednesday night. Havana said something like somebody's name, and I was screwing around, putting on different hats, and I missed something totally important. Totally important. So it's going to happen anyhow. But when you introduce a bunch of anytime you introduce information, you're taking a chance that your plot is going to get diverted or muddied or watered down in a way that you did not anticipate.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that you have to be very carefully scripted about what you reveal to your players. I think it's fun to have those moments where you describe the guy on the wall and they go, well, have I seen this guy? Yes, you've seen that guy. And now all of a sudden that's interesting, right? And they feel like they've accomplished something. Oh, I noticed something relevant. Yeah. Oh, yay for me. I'm engaging in the mystery. I'm figuring out what's happening.
Yeah, becoming part of that world.
Right. Yeah. So you don't have to be 100% scripted about all of the information that you introduce, but don't fall into the trap of, I put so much flowery detail and information into this thing that my players just assume that 95% of what I tell them is flavor that just doesn't matter.
Right.
Or they go, well, 60% of what he says, of the stuff that he says, actually is really, like, those details really matter and will come back to haunt us. So now they're listening to everything and trying to, like, make that judgment call. 60-40.
Try to
does it
what's...
matter? And you're making your job as the DM harder by making the world too lifelike, or too complicated, right? It goes back to when we talk about the adventure structure here, and in engaging with people like Xanathar and Manchun and what like that through encounters rather than engaging on the page, you reading and trying to figure out, this is what his organization is like.
Yeah, or like rather than getting like an exposition dump from an NPC or something.
Exactly, right? Yeah. Like the point of the game is to play it together. And so for the party to learn about a major NPC in town by encountering events that are happening and engaging with actions that are underway, it fulfills the fundamental purpose of the game, right? Like, that's how they're going to learn best. That's how they're going to get involved best. Yeah. That's how they're going to remember it best, because they're like, oh, remember that time when you cast Levitate on that dude who was doing that da-da-da thing in this town square, and we captured him, and then you did this really great, rope use check. my 3-5 my 3-0 roots are revealing themselves, but when they remember those scenes, it makes that material, those plot points, more memorable. So
it sticks. It lands a lot firmer on the player.
Yeah. So that's my kind of little, if you want to call it, a defense of the bullet point system. I mean,
sure.
I was thinking about this today. that I would, and I've talked about this before, like I'd really like to see a huge fundamental shift in the way that adventure information for the GM is structured. And I think this is an interesting step in that direction.
Yeah, I agree.
I also recommend a Dungeon World adventure called Servants of the Cinder Queen. It's for Dungeon World. It's by Lamp Black and Brimstone. Just go on DriveThruRPG and search for Servants of the Cinder Queen. It's a great little... it was a Kickstarter back in the day that was $3. And it was this great little booklet that he clearly had run at a copy shop. But it has a wonderful it has a wonderful structure of here's how you can play through this adventure with very minimal information. Wormdrake says, on the other hand, if you want to run an open world that just contains several possibilities, and you as the DM go in with no preconceived storyline to let the players go in any direction they want, and you just build off of that into one of many possibilities.
Sure, so like pure sandbox play, basically.
Yeah.
Almost,
Yeah. I think that's fine.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes as a DM, you do want a resource to plumb in case, you know, your players go in one direction and you've got a week to figure out, okay, what can I have them do next?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's nice to have resources like these two to kind of like, okay, well, maybe there's a holiday that I can play off of, you know, or there's a section of the city that I can take a look at. Or, you know what, that actually sounds a lot like what this villain is doing. What does the book have to say about what this villain is doing? And then you can just kind of take those elements, reskin it as your own, or like, you know, transport it to your setting, transport the people to, you know, your setting, or reskin the various people here as well.
I think it's difficult. I think it requires advanced skills as a DM to be able to take a 10-sentence premise in terms of setting the scene for the players and then saying, what do you want to do next? And like kind of improvising your way around the world, you know, and around the adventure and whatnot. Like, I think that's a tall order for most GMs, regardless of their... I'm just saying, like if you go in cold with, here's a map,
right?
Here's 10 sentences. You are in the city of Waterdeep. You find yourself standing in the city square. Yeah. There's a strange colored seagull that's squawking an odd melody over on the post. There's a man cutting the purse of a woman with a loaf of bread and a kid in her arm, and there is a stranger with a long flowing silver beard who's riding a majestic white horse who seems to be looking around suspiciously coming up the cobbled stone road. What do you do? Like, if that's all you have, that takes a lot of DM chops to pull off, right? Yeah,
especially for like new DMs in particular that might need a little more guidance.
And to be fair, like, I have run games like that, right? And I'm not saying that to pat my back. I'm just saying you can do it.
Yeah.
And Wormdrake says, you know, it is an advanced skill. Don't remove it as a possibility.
Sure. No.
Definitely not.
Yeah, not at all.
All of this advice from both of us comes with a huge mea culpa, which is where we're coming from and the experience that we have built up is this big, and the world of role-playing games is limited by your imagination and what your players are willing to engage in, right?
Yeah. We are two people in, you know, among hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
And I'm trying to share with you perspectives that I have gained either through my years of playing and running games, but also my experience over the past couple of years of running games on stream, et cetera, et cetera. And it's my particular perspective. Your mileage may vary. Like find the game that's fun for you, regardless of anything that comes out of my mouth. If there's one thing you walk away with from today, it's you might go, well, this book doesn't seem fun for me. I'm not gonna get it.
Yeah.
Fine. Good. Like definitely find the game that's fun for you.
Yeah. And that is something that's actually really good to know about this particular book. While it does detail a lot of, you know, it details a good amount of Waterdeep that you can use to inspire your games or bring the world to life for your players, the bulk of the adventure is definitely like very story related. It's very much a specific adventure and a very specific plot. So it may not necessarily it may not be the urban book or the Waterdeep book that you need for running a city game in your campaign setting.
Right.
You may very well want to look back to Volos Guide to the North, or wasn't there like a Waterdeep box set or something like that?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different.
Yeah,
you can literally go back and
you may be better off looking back at those and plumbing details from those.
I think in terms of a plot, there's like a big plot, capital BP.
Yeah.
But the big plot has like 4 different subplots in order to get from the capital big B to the end T.
Right. Yeah. These are definitely more circumstances.
So I
than
like the
anything
fact
else.
that there's like you can maneuver your little checkerboard pieces around or pick the path that suits you.
Yeah.
In terms of, just to talk momentarily about Sandbox, and I feel like this does is sort of like a blend between here's the plot arc that you're trying to unravel with some sandboxy elements to it, right? It's almost a hybrid. If you want to run a purely sandbox campaign and don't feel like you're up to the wide open improvisational challenge of here's 4 sentences, go. I think those games work best when you have prepared yourself with a bunch of tools, not necessarily a bunch of predefined encounters,
right?
But it's useful to know, okay, here's a list of people, of NPCs that are major forces at play in this area. Here's a list of random encounters that I'm not sure how they join to whatever plot that we're going to discover as I play along with my players, but are flexible enough that I can slot them into what we're exploring, but also have a strong enough hook or detail that that the players are going to go, oh, this is cool, this is interesting, what's going on, right? Like the difficult challenge of running a sandbox campaign is to give yourself tools that are vague enough that it can that you can call upon it when when you need to slot something. What happens next? Okay, there's a burglary. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But they're specific enough in the terms of there's some sort of hook or some sort of interesting thing going on that you go, well, why is this burglary actually interesting? If it's just 3 guys in black masks, who cares? Don't give your players boring, like straightforward experiences. Your players want to figure out what's going on, but they also want to be surprised in the process of doing it. If they're right away, there's no challenge to it.
Right, and if the scope is too small, if there's nothing beyond that encounter, then there's nothing to necessarily drag your or not drag, but I mean to entice your players from one part of the world to the other.
Yeah, and that's really the utmost challenge of the I would say the 3 components to that sandbox thing is 1, what's happening. 2, why is this interesting? And then 3, where does it lead me to, or how does it build? How does it build off of the story that's come before? And the answer can be it doesn't. I'm going to fork this in a different direction. But that's a dangerous move.
And I think that really comes down to the idea of a story having a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know what I mean? And the end of a story just might, push the characters onto another beginning. But I think that's something that's really important to think about as well when you're running a sandbox, so that your characters aren't just milling around in the tavern or like exploring the woods kind of haphazardly. You know what I mean?
So Wormdrake says, I agree, that's what I meant by good improvisational storytelling. And so my response here would be like, I see this as a spectrum, right? So I really described probably like most DMs' nightmares of you've been given 5 sentences of box text, go. On the one extreme end. And the other extreme end is everything is very rigidly scripted and these are the events and this is the plot you have to play through. And this game can work. Like, I've run it at several cons. There's a game called Danger Patrol that's by John Harper, where you don't know what the plot is when you start. You just sit down and you actually roll up a bunch of elements of plot, and then you just make the whole thing up as you go. Yeah. And I've run it successfully, so I've had fun doing that. I've very rarely had fun where the plot was so tightly scripted that I felt like I had any agency. That if it was responding to me, there was a lot of like dead end alleys and missteps that I made. Like, you didn't realize. Don't you remember? You found that golden orb 19 sessions ago that has the weird runes on it, and you're like, no, that was 19 sessions ago. I don't care. Right. So I see it as finding the way to engage your players in the storytelling as part of that continuum. Now, if you want to play on the sandboxy end of things and have elements that are really dynamically responsive to their actions, and that works for you, great. If you like, this book to me is like a middle ground of there's a plot, but here are the things, and we know that your party's gonna do some stuff that's weird. So good luck. You're the DM. You could
sort of fill in the gaps.
And I think that's really like, regardless of where you end up on this whole continuum, what you want to avoid is kind of the top end where the players aren't. You're not incorporating anything or responding to anything that the players give you.
Where their decisions just don't really matter much at all.
Exactly. I always talk about like the fundamental mechanism of DMing being, you provide some sort of piece of interesting information, right? And then the players absorb that, they process it, and they issue a response. And then you process that response and that action and reveal more information. Which they, and that way you just keep kind of playing this ping pong game back and forth. But if you're really tightly scripted on stuff, you're just batting the ball at them. You're not batting the ball back and forth with them.
Right.
So, and don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of improv, and I'm a huge fan of. I really do think it's important to listen to what the players are saying and find ways that you can use their ideas to get them engaged and excited about and invested in what's going on. I think it's difficult, like, if you're playing Adventurers League, you can't really do that, right? This is more like a campaign kind of like idea. You can do it to some degree,
There's some extent that you can do that.
You know, AL is sort of its own beast in terms of, we have this fixed amount of time. Your characters don't really know each other. I don't probably know what world you're coming from. You know, what gaming background you're coming from. What campaign. You know, we're all just sort of amorphously in the Forgotten Realms. And our goal is to start this adventure. You guys bite on the hook, and we will build to the adventure climax
Carry
at the
the story
end.
through.
Yep, and then you walk away and we're done. Bex, thanks for gifting some subs. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Wow.
Oh my lord.
Now I want to remind everybody, it is September, so if you have a sub to the show, and if you've just been gifted a sub or you have a sub to the show, for $1, I believe, you can re-up your sub. Is that right, Dom? Did I describe that properly?
That I've not heard.
Oh, it was announced at, like, I think at TwitchCon or something like that. There's a thing.
TwitchCon hasn't happened yet.
It was announced at something, it was like at PAX or something like that. It was announced last week, and there was something about September. Take a look at it. Yes, September September indeed. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I'm not.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Kineas 2 says when it expires, I believe you can resub. Yeah, if you get a gift sub, you can extend it for $1. So yeah, we hope you all stay tuned with us here. I'm starting my 5e D&D game back up. If you want to see me try to put my GMing principles into practice, we start back up next week with the second half of When a Star Falls. So that's next Wednesday at 8 o'clock Pacific. So so you can use those subs to give people rerolls anyone on the channel who's playing. So whether it's people at my table in my D&D game or one of the games that we have coming up. For instance, tonight is the last installment of It's Always Cloudy in Barovia, where Garav Galati apparently is planning some sort of showdown with Strahd.
Oh boy,
I'm not exactly
right,
sure.
Strahd.
He tweeted
Okay.
something about it last night. I know that Strahd has like either asked them for an audience or asked the party for help. He asked them.
Oh, wow,
Strahd
that's
asked
awesome.
them for help.
That's-
So there'll be more D&D in store tonight if you want to give somebody at the table a reroll for that. I talked a lot, Jay. Do you have responses or
yeah,
your own perspective that you want to share? Because I got excited.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, just as far as again going back to sort of the use of this book versus the kind of game that you want to play. If you're playing, if you are playing a sandbox, that's totally awesome. That's a great way to play a game. It's a great way to involve your players. And you know, again, we sort of hit something of a nice sweet spot in between personally with this book, because what you get is you get a lot of circumstances. Again, you don't get a lot of scripted events. You get a lot of circumstances that you can throw your players at. There are some things that sort of happen in particular orders that, you know, some story beats, let's put it that way. There are story beats that you do hit, and again, that kind of goes with the structure of storytelling from beginning, middle, end. And it ensures that you have sort of a satisfying progress of events that lead to a satisfying conclusion with the adventure. But what you also get are you get a lot of NPCs, and I'll show you the pronunciation guide. There, what would you say it was, like 5 dozen names?
I'm not. You think there's only 60?
You know what? I'm horrible at estimating
Come
stuff
over
like
this
that.
way.
But there are
Stand up a
two
little
columns. Sure, there are 2 columns of like various names. Not all of them are NPCs. Some of them are like places. Some of them are the months of the year. But it's a pronunciation guide for the various, you know, names, proper names that you'll encounter in this book. And what's cool is what you get for a lot of the NPCs here are motivations. The roles that they have to play within the structure of the story that you're trying to tell. And so you can actually take these NPCs and kind of, if you need to reskin them for your game, or if you come across one NPC and they get kind of pushed into other circumstances that they might not necessarily, you know, because of the player's decisions, they get pushed into circumstances that they might not necessarily be a part of. You get more of a sense of, okay, well, how would this character react? You know, you get some guidance of like what sort of drives these characters and like what, you know, how would they fit into this particular world? So I think that's pretty useful. It's kind of easy to, again, with a lot of moving parts, it's really easy to kind of pick and choose and like figure out which parts you want to play, which parts you enjoy as a DM, and which parts you think your players would enjoy.
Yeah, just to pick up Wormdrake is like, don't get me wrong. I like the middle ground that Dragon Heist hits. I was pushing people to use more imagination because I'm an idealist, and I think the way that this is laid out, it does get you to exercise those chops, right?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
You've got those bullet points. You have to. It is on you if you want more detail to fill in more detail.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, I think you're going to have to fill in more detail when you go.
Yeah,
When the players go,
absolutely.
what's the courtroom like? And you give the 4 bullet points, they're going to ask more questions.
Yeah.
At which point, you need to have that skill of being able to describe the room however you want to envision it.
Yeah.
Right? Which is fine. Like I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I will say 2 other things too, since you brought up this sandboxy thing. I feel like a city like Waterdeep is ideal for a sandbox adventure, right?
I mean, it's so big, and there's so many, you know, different parts of the city that you could very well like.
And it's not, and it also like feels like the sandbox has bounds around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
like what scares me about a jungle adventure is, you know, which is kind of like the
Yeah.
classic hex crawl. Let's put it that
Right,
way,
right.
like Isle of Dread, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is you spend a lot of time going, okay, we go over there. Anything happen? No. Okay, we go over there. Anything happen? No.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're
we go
lost
over there.
for
You know, you're just
3
filling in
days
like what
and-
hexes are, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a problem where there's not enough interesting things that are happening, and then number 2, like the players are like, well, we don't have a direction or da 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 da.
Yeah.
And with Waterdeep, you can put the map on the table, and they go, oh, well, let's go down to the docks and see what's going on down there. You know, and
Right.
they know that you know the next day, if they want to go to the castle ward, they can go to the castle ward.
Right.
Like, that's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Like they have a map of, well, here are our possibilities.
Yeah.
And there's always something interesting to explore someplace.
Sure, yeah, and actually that brings up another interesting point when you talk about like wilderness adventures or jungle hex crawls or other adventures or adventure segments like that. With a lot of that, there's usually like some resource management that you have to do. Do the players have enough food?
Yeah.
Are they facing weather? Difficulties because of the weather. Are they getting exhausted? Are they getting sick? In this case, you generally don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. They're in a city. Right. They can, as long as they have like a gold piece, they can find, a place to stay without having to worry about starving or anything like that. So it's a little that's like one less thing you have to think about, which makes it an interesting, which is I think that makes the DM's job a little easier in certain cases.
And also the player's job.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Like the players may feel a little bit lost in the big city.
Sure, yeah.
But they don't feel helpless in the big city.
Right.
Yeah. So,
generally.
which is,
and if they are, it's usually a choice. You've picked the urchin background and you're really scrounging for scraps on the street.
I think I want to shift gears a little bit here too. I think this is an adventure for characters 1 through 5. Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of different ways to tackle the storyline that's included in here. What I like about this particular book that I think is different than the other big hardbacks is I think this is probably playable in 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah,
like depends upon how often you play, obviously. Yeah. But it's certainly much more manageable. You're probably talking 10 to 12 encounters or 10 to 12 sessions, maybe. Maybe 15, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe 15.
Yeah.
But unlike, I played Storm King's Thunder through AL, and we really worked hard to get through it in 6 months.
Yeah, right.
And that was like editing a bunch of stuff off, right? Whereas this, I feel like, that's like we could do this in 3 months.
Sure, yeah.
With some creative editing, I'd feel
pretty
solid on that.
Yeah.
Now that's me DMing it for Adventurers League. That's not me DMing it for stream.
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely.
It's the ghost of Estelle Castillo going, "Oh, really, Tom? You could do this in 3 months." I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, again, it also depends on your style of play. If your group has limited time,
right?
If your group only gets together like once a month instead of once a week or once every 2 weeks, I think this is still pretty doable in an amount of time that would allow you to get through the story before your group kind of gets dissolved by real life, shall we say?
And I like the advancement works so fast, and when those from 1 to 5,
that
the adventure
really
can't be super long, right?
Yeah.
So I think I like the fact that if we go back to there seems to be an implicit design consideration of we have new people coming into the hobby. Mm-hmm. What can we give them for an intro that maybe they've gamed before, or they've watched games before.
Right.
That's not not the on rails experience of the starter set.
Right.
But is not the intimidating experience of
Tomb of Annihilation or something like that. Yeah. One of the bigger adventures.
I enjoyed playing Out of the Abyss. But it goes up to level 15, and the storyline kind of wanders in places and whatnot. And I think it's a struggle. I will say also, I'm much less a fan of the campaign than I am a fan of the season at this point, right? I think we put too much stock in the idea of playing up to level 20 or level 16 or whatever. Certainly there's satisfaction in doing that, right?
Sure.
But so many times, and this is how I started my career, which was, hey, we're starting a campaign. Do you want to play? Mm-hmm. And the sad truth of it is, the biggest impediment to people playing more Dungeons and Dragons is their calendar. Mm-hmm. It's getting those people together, whether that's getting them together online in a Roll20 type of space, or getting them together in person at somebody's house.
Yeah.
Like making those schedules come together is the tough part. And when you say, let's start a campaign, it's almost like asking somebody to
almost like asking somebody to take on a part-time job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to dedicate the time, or ideally you dedicate the time. And obviously players, something will come up that evening and you'll get the email or the phone call or the text saying, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it this session. And then how do you work that player back in?
But it's also a part-time job where you may not necessarily know what the working conditions are going to be like, what you're going to be treated like by your boss or your coworkers, and whether you like any of what you're making.
Exactly. Like any of your assigned duties.
Right.
This is very true. Yeah.
And when you say you want to join a campaign, it's this open-ended commitment that I think is a trap, or can be a trap. Like, I don't think it's generally presented in a way that gives people an out.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. I know what you mean.
And so the time commitment, the calendar works both ways. Where one, how do we all find a night to play? But also, guess what? We're gonna have to find a night to play 3 years from now, because we're still gonna be playing. Because once every 6 weeks we get to play this, and you as the DM are like, well, when did they even do 6 weeks ago? Like I've found that struggle in my own personal life.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of, let's play to level 1 to 5. Let's try this thing out. And guess what? It's just it's gonna be 4 months or 5 months, or whatever it is, and then it's over with. And it was fun. It was a fun story.
Yeah.
So rather than Black Dragon 8K, thanks for 7-Up. So rather than playing this big sprawling epic adventure, which has its place, like I'm not poo-pooing that in the slightest. I've done it. I've engaged in it. I love it. When you can make that commitment and it all works out, it is one of the most satisfying things that you can do in this
through
hobby.
a year-long, 2-year-long, 3-year-long campaign. Absolutely.
So I like the fact that this is a bite-sized chunk.
Yeah.
Unlike, I would say, all of their other current hardcover offerings, with the exception of the starter set, and even the starter set is kind of
or
long,
of like
right?
Tales of the Yawning Portal, which
That's
is
true.
6 self-contained adventures of their own. Ooh.
Well, so we played Tales.
Sure.
We played White Plume Mountain, and we had a lot of fun with the vampire, the Sunless Citadel.
Oh, sure, yeah,
thing,
yeah.
Right? I would not recommend Tales of the Yawning Portal as a great intro adventure, except maybe using Sunless Citadel. Right.
Yeah.
I enjoyed using that and adapting it, and it's a compelling little dungeon. But some of those old school dungeons that they updated to 5e just do not hold up to my type of storytelling. If you want to explore them in that old school way of there's 3 golems behind this door, and in the next door there's a hobgoblin mage who's just waiting there to attack you.
Yeah.
Like that's it's fine as a great little dungeon crawler.
Sure. Yeah. Or like maybe as a side quest, but
or a one-off or whatever it is. Like for those purposes. But for an intro adventure to somebody who's like, oh, I've watched some stuff on stream, my friends are excited, Sunless Citadel is certainly something that I would, pick it up for that. And it might be instructive to like steal some encounters from other stuff.
Sure. Well, and I think that's sort of the fundamental difference between Sunless Citadel and those other adventures. The other adventure, by the time Sunless Citadel and Forge of Fury, which is the adventure that follows that up, they're written with a little more story behind them.
Yeah.
And so there's a little more to kind of push the characters through. There's story. Don't get me wrong. There's story and the other adventures in Tales from the Yawning Portal.
The story of White Plume Mountain is you're trapped in this dungeon and you have to try to escape.
Sure, right? And there were these like weapons that were sort of created that you can find. There's a little bit of history in there.
And there's
mad wizards and such.
The challenge of figuring out the riddles and the puzzles.
Sure, yeah.
So there are play experiences that are fun. From a narrative point of view, it comes at a dungeon design with a very particular slant, which when I started playing D&D, was like that was our game. That was the way
Yeah.
we played. Like kill
Yeah.
monsters, get treasure,
Yeah,
level up.
You kind of go through the rooms of the dungeon. There's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason to them.
Yeah. But you didn't question that because when I started playing D&D, you couldn't go play World of Warcraft. You couldn't go off and play EverQuest. Like when I started playing D&D, it was like, well, you could play wizardry by yourself.
Sure, yeah,
Or whatever.
Yeah, right.
But so the whole idea of like, oh, you create these characters and they level up and they become more powerful and like even more magic and then like we got on that treadmill and it was fun to explore that idea.
Sure, yeah.
I suspect when you were growing up it was like, oh yeah, of course you level up. Like
Yeah. I mean, it was a pretty similar experience. You know what I mean?
Right.
When I was creating, like the first dungeon I created made absolutely like no sense.
Yeah.
Because I was like,
Yeah.
here's a room, here are the monsters I want to put in it. There you go.
I feel like the example that is out there in the contemporary zeitgeist is let's create these cool magical characters who then get involved in a narrative.
Yeah. Generally.
Even if you're playing a one-off AL thing that has by definition sort of a limited scope, you're still like exploring, well, what's the story that's happening here? Even if that's go to the swamp, find the temple, and confront the person. That villain, in almost every AL adventure I've seen, that villain has some sort of personal stake or motivation for
absolutely.
what's behind them.
Yeah, precisely.
So-
Sometimes that carries over in some plots. Sometimes you beat the villain, they're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's just my we played Tales and I've gotten a lot of use out of it.
Sure.
In terms of recommending it as the book of intro adventures, like I'm going to start a new D&D group and nobody knows anything about D&D. I think it has the potential to be useful, but tread carefully.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, I mean, a lot of the appeal of Tales from the Yawning Portal is to, players who've played various previous editions that are familiar with some of these settings and kind of want to run their players through it. And, ooh, what do we got here?
Somebody gifted a sub. I don't know if it was Null Zone or who, but somebody gifted a sub to Richard McSundy.
Awesome.
So that's great. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to sort of launch into something else that I noticed about the book.
Go ahead. Wait a minute. Are we talking about a book today? Because I have many opinions which I like to expound upon here.
So anyway, you know what? Going back to Waterdeep Dragon Heist and Wizards of the Coast, the D&D teams shift from box text to more, giving DMs circumstances and characters and goals and motivations. When you look at that from that perspective, a lot of the flavor given in the art. So this is a scene from the Yawning Portal, and it might not necessarily tell you like what is in the Yawning Portal, but look, there's a hook horror head hanging off in the distance. The hearth looks like this demon face that's almost reminiscent of the Tomb of Horror's demon face,
or even the original AD&D Player's Handbook.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mentioned like the maps all being made by Dyson Logos and being these just very plain black and white, cross-hatched pieces. Whereas the other maps that are by Mike Schley or Jared Blando, I love them. They look wonderful and they look great and they're awesome to show to players and such. But there's a lot of detail in them, a lot of flavor. These kind of give the DM a real blank slate, to kind of fill on their own.
What I like about this too is you can photocopy this or whatever version of it, whatever reproduction you want to make, right? Snap a picture with your camera and throw it in a Word doc. What I like about it being kind of like bare bones and essentially stark black and white like this is what I always do is even when the map's in color, I make a black and white version that is just outline rooms.
Sure.
And I will then write in, okay, Q11, 4 hobgoblins. One of them has a poisoned blade, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They're on guard here until or whatever it is. So I'll quick do like a dungeon census with arrows pointing at all of the different rooms. So I can create like a one sheet.
Sure, yeah. So like one-page dungeon style.
Yeah. And that way, and not necessarily with any of this detail, because that's what the book's for, but I will just have that page on there as my map key with, that way I know if a fight breaks out in this room, let's see, it's going to take about 3 rounds for anybody from here to even notice or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I have an idea of would the person in this cell be aware of what's going on?
Yeah.
And if so, how long it would take them to respond to something that's going over here?
Like how many monsters do we have here that could potentially respond to an encounter there? Or what happens if the players run here before they get to, X encounter?
Yeah.
I agree.
So that's one of the things that I appreciate about this black and white style, because I love a fancy, isometric map or whatever that kind of paints the scene for me and is also functional, but invariably I end up taking a piece of tracing paper, laying it over, and then you're kind of going like, is that brown or is that green?
Sure, yeah,
is
exactly. All that
brown?
detail, yeah.
Well,
and as a DM, I mean, I personally love to use flip mats or the adventure grid. I like to use like battle mats that you draw on with your dry erase marker, and this is just so much easier to kind of base your drawings on or base your on the fly mapping on. As opposed to say a map like that. I mean, that's not necessarily a good example. The Waterdeep map isn't a good example of another map to use, but these are so easy to read and so easy to sketch out. That I would feel comfortable just running an adventure, running this segment of the adventure with just that and just sketching it all out.
And not everything is,
sure,
a
so
dungeon
snap
sewer
to a
thing,
square,
right?
yeah.
Right? So this is a this is a boat. This is a special craft. That's again in the Dyson Logos style. So you have I don't want to give away all of the maps, but I just want to show some examples of something that's maybe not the standard, like 4 blocky rooms connected by a set of hallways. Yep. Where is the... it's back here. I'm looking for that courtyard villa again. That was 117, I think. Yeah. And so this is probably one of the most complicated maps in the adventure, and it doesn't necessarily have a lot of right angles to it or whatever, but you can very clearly see what's going on. Everything's crisp and well delineated. You have a great idea of what's happening. So, so I think they've done a solid. It's been a solid choice for them. To step in this direction.
Yeah, absolutely. The design choices are very, very clear as far as this adventure goes.
And I don't say that necessarily to disparage any of the other map makers out there, because I'm a huge fan of maps. Period. This is just a different choice that I think works well for the practical purposes that I want to use it for, which is. Quick, I'm going to photocopy this or take a picture with my camera, slap it into a Word document, print it off on another piece of paper that I can then scribble and draw and notate and really get messy. Because my OCD doesn't let me draw in the book or post-it notes in the book.
Yeah.
I need to have another piece of paper that my brain knows is disposable that I can then scribble up and write on. So that's one of the things I appreciate about this particular thing for my purposes. Yeah. Is there anything else? Like, I'm happy with the book. Right?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic adventure.
I haven't read far enough to remember what's going on in here, but I like this picture.
There is some really, really fantastic art in this book.
Sure. I don't understand how the camera works, but that's okay.
Here's
We're just catching some light is the problem. It's fine.
Man, that was really cool.
So,
here's another.
Coloring your maps with pencils is a brilliant idea, right? Like I love the idea of taking a colored pencil or like a highlighter and going, okay, this is the area where people are on patrol. This is the residential areas or whatever.
Sure. Just making that visual reference, in addition to whatever notes you might have.
Wormdrake is talking about the illustrations in the Fiend Folio.
Oh yeah.
I'm not gonna pick it up, but yeah.
Here's a little piece of art that's pretty fantastic. What we have here is a mind flayer with an intellect devourer in his hand. He's kind of like just cradling it like a cat or like small puppy or something like that.
Yeah, why not?
Really cool.
This is an interesting character too. There's a nimble right that's involved in the adventure. All right. I feel like we've. I guess at this point, my question would be, chat. Is there anything in the book that you're curious about that you maybe want to, something specific you want to take a look at? Like, we flipped through a lot of stuff, but if there's something about the book that you're curious about, we'll be happy to answer some questions. The whole idea is that this is, an interactive kind of experience here too.
Yeah.
So if there's something in chat that you have a question about.
And while we're waiting for questions to drop in, I'd sort of like to touch upon like how you could use this book.
Sure.
In relation to either your home campaign or in other 5th edition D&D adventures. Exciting villain group. Oh yeah, there you go. That's a good question. Let's see. Kineas2 asks, have either of you seen an exciting villain or group you want to hear more about? I'm gonna assume talking about it in
it's spoiler time,
in the
right?
context. Yeah, no, this is very true. The villain group that I am most excited about in this book are the Castellanters. They're a duo of nobles, Waterdevian nobles, who very much operate in plain sight. And I'm not necessarily going to give out their sticker, like how they what they do throughout the course of the adventure. But yeah, I just love the idea of these two kind of being out in the open and being able to send agents out openly against the characters and having them interact with that and sort of having to play through the ranks of the nobility and being able to see what you can do with these guys here.
I mean, I love the fact that the big guns like Manchun and Xanathar are involved, and that,
Jarlaxle and the Brigand Darth,
right?
Yeah.
So all of that appeals to me, but I'm actually going to zero in on a much smaller detail, which is, like I said, so the party pretty early on gets this opportunity to take over this tavern and kind of establish themselves in this neighborhood, right? One of the best parts about that chapter and that story development is they include a business rival. And so apart from the idea that there's this mysterious like Manchun's forces are arrayed against you and like apart from the epic scope of that, I love that idea of the guy down the block doesn't like you.
Yeah.
And the
Just
guy down
wants
the
to
block
antagonize you.
is going to, it's like you're gonna have a rivalry with someone that you may not be able to kick out of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
That you may not be able to defeat through combat.
Yeah, and you're not going to deal with as mechanically with your action surge or with your second attack or anything like that. Your extra attack. Yeah, you're going to have to sort of pick and choose how you interact with that guy.
Yeah. And I like, to me, I love that. Why are you still doing this? I told you to stop. So at any rate, see, now my phone says it's off. Whatever. Stop. No. There we go. All right. So yeah, I just love the idea that even if he's not a villain, that there's a guy there who's an antagonist and that the party is going to be like, oh, it's this guy again.
Yeah,
oh,
right.
Let's get him.
Yeah.
Like that level of personal connection is fun to play out, and you can use that guy to advance the plot.
Yeah.
If you so choose.
Yeah.
Or he can just be a guy in the neighborhood who's a dick.
Right. Yeah.
Just be that flavor text of like, okay, well, you come home at 3 a.m, like weeping blood and all, covered in scratches and brambles and stuff like that, and there he is.
Yeah.
Oh, getting home kind of late, huh? That's funny. We had a really good night at my place. I don't know what you're doing over there.
Yeah. Right.
So.
Yeah, it just changes the scope of the adventure overall.
Yeah.
It makes it so that you can kind of zoom in on something as well as pan out to like a bigger thing.
Kania says, I believe there's another resource book coming out with the Lords of Waterdeep, so I was curious if they are in this book, considering they're sort of a shadow council ruling the city. They talk about the Lords of Waterdeep.
Yeah, the masked Lords of Waterdeep.
Yeah, I don't think they've revealed, other than Laeral Silverhand, I don't think they've revealed anybody else. but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, there have been other like books since like there was, what is it, Death Masks, I think, by Ed Greenwood.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
that was recently released. That's probably about as much detail as the Masked Lords have gotten in this, this current incarnation of D&D. But they've kind of been coming and going through various adventures here and there, and I think we'll probably see a little more of them sometime in the future. They're not specifically. Like their presence is pretty limited here in Waterdeep Dragon Heist.
Well, and part of the conceit of that is it's a way to enforce law and order, right? Because you never know if that guy who's the dick on the corner who's like, oh, you're getting calm, kind of like, you don't know if he could actually be a masked lord or Waterdeep.
Yeah.
So you can't go around willy-nilly like antagonizing people and assassinating people. Because you never know if you're going to get in over, and the forces of the city are going to come down upon you. Yeah. So, that's kind of it's. I understand the appeal of like, oh, let us in on the secret.
Right.
But part of the problem of letting you in on the secret is it undercuts
certain aspects of the narrative. I suppose
It's in some ways it kind of like takes away from you as the DM because you're like, oh well, the guy who owns the armorer on the armor shop on the corner, he's not one of the Lords of Waterdeep because it doesn't say so in the book. So
right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something like that. So that's we don't really have a ton of time to go through. I kind of teased this at the beginning. I backed the Creature Codex Kickstarter from
Kobold
Press, yeah. That was like Wolfgang Press that's not the name. Kobold Press. I have been super pleased with the Tome of Beasts. If you're looking for different monsters to change up the challenges, if your party is like, oh, okay, I know what a troll does. Well, yeah, guess what? It's not a troll. I really recommend the Tome of Beasts, and so when they said they were going to come up with a sequel called the Creature Codex, I was like, yes, I am in. So it is 420 pages. It is both literally and figuratively behemoth. The quality is, at least on par with what you would expect to get from. Is this in focus? I guess it is. From Wizards. Wolfgang and company have collaborated and freelanced for Wizards, so I really trust their judgment in terms of making the stats appropriate and balancing the monsters and whatnot. What I love about the stuff in Tome of Beasts, I literally just got this out today as well. I just got it. I always feel like every monster has a shtick, right? Like, so if you're one of those people who, like me, who picks up a book and goes, well, what cool thing does this monster do? I'm going to give you an example just because I flipped to a page of it right here, right? So the Elofar does some sort of like spirit control or whatever, right? Like, I haven't read this entry, so I don't know what it is. But I look at this thing and I go, oh, what's that? And then I start, then all the wheels start turning. Like, okay, how can I incorporate this into an encounter? What can this do? Like, oh, what does that suggest? And I won't necessarily use it even straight out. I might reskin it or whatever. But I found it to be very inspiring. I found the monsters to be tough challenges for my parties. I have been scaling back. In general, I've just been scaling back for stream. I've been scaling back the hit points and stuff like that that my parties fight, just because I want combats to be a little more concise. But they do a solid job, and I would recommend you pick up the PDF. It should be available, or pick up the hardcover, or both, whatever you want to do. But that's the Creature Codex from Kobold Press, and I can't recommend it.
That's between Creature Codex and Tome of Beasts. That's like.
It's a ton of monsters.
A few hundred monsters that you're adding to your 5th edition game. Yeah. Because I think it's almost a monster page for like the bulk of the book, right?
Yeah. I would say there's probably somewhere on the order of like 400 monsters.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, between those two books, you got a lot of life. Yeah.
But that's it's a great resource. Check it out. trying to think if there's anything else. So we'll be on the lookout for. I'm curious. I don't know anything about the Mazes of the Mad Mage.
Oh,
or whatever.
sure. That is worth mentioning.
It just went to the
um,
printer like yesterday. So
Yeah, Waterdeep Dragon Heist is actually, again, because it's levels 1 through 5, sort of one of the purposes of this book is to segue into the next Wizards hardcover book, Waterdeep Dungeons of the Mad Mage, which takes place in Undermountain, which is a gigantic multi-level dungeon that takes place, that is set under the city of Waterdeep. And that adventure goes from level 6 through, I think it goes from level 6 through 20.
yeah, it's big.
Yeah, it's huge.
I'm
It's
curious
like just
to-
levels
I'm
and
curious
levels.
how many pages
of,
it's going to be.
Yeah.
And,
well, I think it's going to be at least the size of, like a hardcover
I think it might be
adventure.
bigger.
Yeah, probably.
But
yeah, and if you ended up liking this adventure and you kind of want to segue your players to a whole other adventure, that one's coming out I think in November.
is it that soon? Yeah, I suppose it is.
Yeah. Well, that gives you just enough time to kind of play this, doesn't it?
I think.
Or is it even sooner?
No, I think November. Maybe it is coming out in November.
Yeah.
I know that November is. That's when they've announced the magic stuff, right? So that.
Oh, Ravnica.
Yeah.
The Magic the Gathering setting for
Yeah, I
5th
think
edition.
that's when the hardcover of that comes out is in
might-
November, right?
Yeah,
because I
maybe.
believe that.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of November, Saving Throw is going to be at Gamehole Con in Madison, Wisconsin. You can come and watch us stream live. We have special guests that I think I can announce at this point. Is that correct, Mr. Zip? Huh? Yeah, we can. Yeah. So at Gamehole Con, we're going to be doing a stream with D&D Beyond. We're going to be raising funds for Extra Life, and the Double Clicks will be sitting in with us.
That's
So I will be DMing, and Gaurav and Amy and Dom will be playing along with the Double Clicks, and Rich Molina, who's Laser's spouse. So you can come join us for that, but that's also the week that the Ravnica D&D Magic compilation comes together and comes out. So hopefully Dungeons of the Mad Mage comes out at the same time, too.
It comes out around
That's pretty
sometime
exciting.
then, I think.
November 13th.
There we go.
Yeah. So, I hope there's more information about Waterdeep, or I expect that's actually going to be just much more of a drill down, like Dungeons of Undermountain, like here's all the crazy,
exactly. Which is sort of the
stuff.
nature of Undermountain is it's just levels upon levels of dungeons kind of descending into the earth.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. So that's that's coming up. Yeah, I guess the next month. So their printing time is that fast. I wonder if they use U.S.-based printers.
I don't know. That's a good question. I wouldn't be able to tell you. But I mean, again, that kind of gives you enough time to get through this adventure, get your characters from levels 1 through 5, and then transition to Dungeons of the Mad.
Kind of pick and choose.
Yeah.
I
Or transition to one of the other adventures too. So.
I remember reading through this and thinking to myself, levels 1 through 5, is that really what I want this thing to be? And now that I've seen it, it is what I want this thing to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I'm really excited about this as a campaign kickoff.
Yeah.
Let's play D&D type of resource. I love it.
Well, I mean, the only other alternative to this is one of the books that goes through from levels 1 through
to 10 or 12
17,
or whatever.
1 through 10.
Yeah.
Or the starter set, which goes through levels 1 through 4, and it's a very that's a very different flavor of adventure.
Right.
This one, I mean, running it for players here, for example, in Los Angeles or any other major city, it's an urban setting. It's kind of a little less to adapt to than just your Dark Ages sort of fantasy setting.
It's nice to have that alternative. If you want to do a dungeon crawl and have a traditional D&D, go out in the woods and bore into caves, like the Spelunk kind of thing, you've got that, right? You've got the starter set. Terrific. And it's nice to now go like, oh, we already played that, but I want to start over or whatever, to have a different alternative.
Sure, yeah.
We need to wrap up because Jay has some things he has to take care of. But before we do that, we did get a blind box. I got a blind box from my friendly local game store, Emerald Knights, here in beautiful Burbank, California. And so because Jay's been on a couple times and been so gracious with his time, and I literally messaged him yesterday at like 3 o'clock or something like that, like
before either of us had seen the book.
Make a stream?
Yeah.
So Jay, this is yours. This is
my
your
goodness!
reward
Thank you so much. I appreciate it
for coming on the
Thank you.
show and sharing your insights and information. You
Okay,
have
thanks.
to open it on stream so
Okay.
everybody can. But whatever you get is all yours.
Sure. Okay.
So-
Well, awesome. First of all, thanks, Tom. I really, really appreciate
Well,
it.
thank you.
I'm
for
super
coming.
excited because there are some really cool minis that have been included in the set. So okay, here we go.
Now, I
Let's
will
see what
tell
we-
you that Danielle, who's the manager at the store, told me that the other day she saw somebody pull a Xanathar.
Oh
So,
my lord!
I don't know if
that's
that
awesome.
increases or decreases your odds.
Depends
But,
on how many. I think it depends on how many cases they got. So. Regardless, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
You're
This
welcome.
is
Well, thanks
awesome.
for coming in. I always appreciate your insights and
Yeah, my pleasure.
conversation.
It's always great to be able to talk D&D. So
Yeah.
okay, here we go. Let's see what we got. I see a.
These
big
are pre-painted.
figure.
Yes, these are pre-painted
They are.
minis. They're from WizKids, right?
So the big figure. Usually these will come with like one big figure and 4 smaller figures. The big figure looks like it's a dire wolf. Very nice sculpt of a dire wolf. Is that a dire wolf? Yep, dire wolf. Love it.
Very dynamic pose. And let's see what the mini minis are. So looks like a monk. That's
Oh, that's
awesome.
the
That
cool
is a
one.
really cool monk figure.
Human, dwarven, I can't.
It's human, I think.
right?
Human Sun Soul monk. So this is one of
Oh,
the
nice.
Ken Ryu monks. Oh,
look at that.
What is that? What the heck is that? An animated door. So it's a door. It looks like a door, but it's on some sort of like stand here. So it's like rips itself off the wall and it kind of floats along. It can cause all sorts of shenanigans. That's cool. And a city watch. This is one of the Waterdeep City Watch figures. So that's awesome. Makes a great human fighter with a mace, or a cleric, for example, perhaps. So he's got a mace and a buckler. The paints are great. The paint jobs on these are fantastic. They're really, really well done, and there's like this great amount of detail in these 2 human figures. So that's awesome. Tom, thank you very,
You're
very
welcome,
much. I'm
yeah.
looking forward to making a character around this guy here.
They really look. They look terrific.
Yeah, they do.
I have to say, like, my biggest downfall is not being able to paint my man.
Yeah.
I mean, I just can't make the time because I'm
Yeah.
awful.
No, same here.
I never have. I mean, I'm so busy preparing adventures or writing that I just don't have time to paint my own minis. So these are always a blessing when you find good ones.
All right. Well, I know that you usually like to just have a squad of 8 Godzillas stomp around your battle map, but maybe somehow
No.
you'll find a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this guy is definitely going to get a character made out of him, and then if I get the chance, I love being able to be mini accurate when I can.
Yeah,
so
this
these
is
are
a
gonna be
terrific
useful.
monk.
And this is awesome. What the
character,
hell? Oh,
Yeah.
I can't
I
wait to
don't
be
even
able
know
to.
that I love the fact that it's just so weird. right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly. I can't wait to sick a door against my players.
I can
It's
find
great.
a cheap way to put 20 different city guards on the map if I need to.
Yeah.
But these types of things are things that I look at
Yeah.
and go, oh, I will create an encounter around
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
thing.
My players are going to remember
Yeah.
that thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I do love mini painting when I find the time and I'm able to bring that character to life. It really is satisfying and rewarding.
Yeah.
But I gotta carve that time out, and then for me, it's like I've got D&D adventures to plan. I can't get down to the nitty gritty. When you're a player, I think it's easier and definitely more satisfying to be like, okay, this is the sculpt that I'm going to use, and I'm going to paint the colors that I want it to paint or whatever.
Yeah,
But,
especially with like services like Hero Forge, where you really just get to create the details that you want on your mini.
down to we'll show them on Wednesday. We have Hero Forge minis for our Iron Keep crew, and we got them painted from Iron Tusk, and we'll be debuting those Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. is my next D&D game, so you can tune in here on Saving Throw for that. We start the second half of our When a Star Falls arc. It's a great time to jump in. We've just been on a hiatus for 3 weeks, so you can tune in. You can also tune in Tuesday at 2 o'clock Pacific, and I will be talking about prepping the game. I have my regular session of Disorganized Play. You can join me, with Dom, talking about prepping the game. What's up for this second half of this season of the Iron Keep Chronicles. So I'll have some GM talk on next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Tonight, as I mentioned, at 8 o'clock is the final installment of It's Always Cloudy in Barovia. Strahd needs help. Will the players abide and accede to his wishes? That's a great question. Sunday at 5 o'clock, we have Tempting Fate. Tune in for GM... Wait, it's GM Gina DeVivo. Am I right about that, Dom? Yes. Gina DeVivo takes over the Game Master chair, and Rick turns his game over to her for another installment of Tempting Fate. So check that out. That should be fun and exciting. I'm sure there'll be a ton of hijinks going on there. And then, as I said, next week, I'm back with Disorganized Play on Tuesday, and D&D resumes Wednesday night at 8 p.m. We'll have much more. You can do ! calendar in the chat and check out what's going on. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in today. This is like literally spur of the moment. Like I said, yesterday I was like, let's do a look. Yep. All right, we did it. So special thanks to Jay for coming in. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure, anytime.
I hope you put some player down, at least get him knocked unconscious with those minis there. And special thanks to everyone who subbed up during the stream today, tuned in, spread the word on social media, became a Patreon backer, what have you. It is honestly only through your generous support and spreading the word that our channel is able to sustain and grow itself. So we've got a lot of exciting things in store for you. I hope you will come back later tonight and tune in for that. Do you remember the how we close this thing out? Yeah. A special thanks to all of our mods who help keep the channel safe, friendly, clean, and accessible. Big thanks to Dom Zook, who came in early to make all of this happen. Until next time, let's dungeon!